You want answers?
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
All right. Well, we had kind of a good news day today. Well, I shouldn't say kinda. It's an incredible good news today in that the state of Illinois, Governor Quinn, finally signed, after about a month, the most restrictive medical marijuana bill in the nation. That's good news to people in the state of Illinois who may suffer from one of the something like 42 different ailments that are specifically listed in their bill. This is great news. It means that now we've got 20 medical marijuana states. We've also got Maryland, which you really can't call it a medical marijuana state. They have a bill that allows universities to do trial studies, right? So kinda. So 20 medical marijuana states, Maryland's little thing, and then District of Columbia. And if you add up the people in all those 22 jurisdictions, you get 39% of the American population, at least according to the 2010 census. It's about 120 million people now in this country live in a state where there is some sort of protection for the medical use of cannabis. And if you add up the electoral votes of those states, it comes up to 40% of all the electoral votes. It's like 160 something. I forget the exact count. What I'm getting to here is from a public perception standpoint, we have gone beyond the tipping point where medical marijuana is seen as somewhat inevitable. At least in states that consider themselves blue or swing states, it's pretty much an inevitability that there will be medical marijuana. Now, some of the deep red states, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, Texas, it might be a tougher row to hoe. But even in those states, I think they're going to be affected by so many other states allowing for medical use. That's the good news. On the big picture front, we are definitely winning. However, there are a lot of things that should be brought to bear, should be pointed out here in this Illinois bill that leave me a little bit troubled. Of course, there is the no home grow. Nobody in the state of Illinois will be allowed to grow their own plants. They must shop for them at a dispensary. They must be limited to 2.5 ounces every 2 weeks. They will have a card, kind of like not a debit card, but like when you get special points at like a coffee shop or a pizza place or a sub shop, buy 5 sandwiches, get your 6th one free kind of thing. And they keep track of how many sandwiches you have. Sometimes they have a punch card. Nowadays, they've got a magnetic card that stores how many purchases you've had. That's what they're going to have for medical marijuana cards in the state of Illinois. A card that when you buy will track exactly how much you purchased, so nobody could possibly have more than 2.5 ounces in that 2-week period. So very, very strict here and required to have to go shop at dispensaries where we don't know yet if there's going to be any limitation on strains or potency, how much variety there will be. But I can tell you that when the government's in charge of these things compared to the free market, you're always going to get less quality and less selection. That's just the natural fact of this. The other troubling aspects of this, of course, the doctor-patient relationship. What the Box Canyon theory is really about is noting that as we fight for medical marijuana, as we continue to fight for medical marijuana, we also continue to imply that some people are non-medical, and we imply that we have to set up a medical program as strictly as we can to prevent the non-medical people from getting into it. It's the Box Canyon, it's the conundrum of medical marijuana that says some people are healthy enough to put in a cage. And in order to separate the sick enough from the healthy enough, we have to have stricter and stricter laws. And this has been what we have seen as medical marijuana has progressed throughout time. We started with California. For any illness for which a doctor says marijuana will provide relief, for as many plants in possession as a doctor says you're going to need. Well, the next 3 states that took up medical marijuana, Washington, Oregon, and Alaska, quickly saw that as a loophole huge enough to drive a truck through, truck full of marijuana, and they promptly tightened that up. There wouldn't be just a limitless amount of conditions that any doctor, because what the hell do doctors know, that any doctor could recommend for. No, the legislature knows better than doctors, and they'll make sure that it's going to be, I'm sorry, I guess in this case it wasn't legislatures, it was the initiative process, but to get through the initiative process, we'll limit it to just a significant number of conditions, significantly ill conditions. And then possession limits became less and less as states further on down the line decided that there was too much diversion to the black market. Oh my goodness, healthy people might be getting marijuana, and they're getting it cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Prices down here on the West Coast have dropped to around $200, $150 an ounce for top shelf meds. My God, we can't have healthy people having cheap marijuana. So the rules become stricter and stricter. The conditions become stricter and stricter, to the point where now Illinois makes the 9th state in a row since 2010 to pass medical marijuana with no home growing. Now, to be fair, 2010 was Arizona. They do allow home growing if you live farther than 25 miles from a dispensary. So if you're out in the boonies, you can grow your own. But if you're anywhere near a city, forget about it. And state of Massachusetts also allows for home growing in limited circumstances where you can claim a hardship exemption. If you're too poor, you live too far away, then you can claim a hardship and be able to grow your own marijuana. But the rest of the states that have passed this have not allowed for home grow. And Illinois now makes the 9th state. And this is always because law enforcement has something to say about that. Governor Maggie Hassan up in New Hampshire would not sign a bill. She said, I will veto any medical marijuana bill that comes through with home growing attached to it because of pressure from law enforcement. She often said that she was deferring to law enforcement on the issue. And sure enough, what gets passed in New Hampshire to make the 19th state a bill that allows no home growing, despite the fact that Maine, Vermont, right on either side of them, allows for home growing. Some reason in New Hampshire, they couldn't keep a lid on it. And Illinois, of course, is not going to allow home growing either. Now, the question then becomes, well, if medical marijuana won't pass, if it has home growing in it, do you not fight for medical marijuana? Well, that's the other dilemma we find ourselves in politically. When we originally posted the medical marijuana issue in the early 90s, it was kind of a wedge issue. It was kind of a leverage that we had, where the typical viewpoint of the marijuana user was the stoner, the criminal, the loser. And we were able to wedge them away from that by saying, well, no, it can be medical use. There's sick people who actually gain medical benefit from it. But in creating that wedge, we wedged ourselves away from most of the pot smokers. Most pot smokers are not medical, or if they are, have a medical condition that won't qualify under most of these state laws, especially the newer ones. It worked for us initially to turn public sentiment into, well, okay, we can legalize it for the sick people. But now we find ourselves hoist by our own petard. Now they can turn to us and say, well, if this is really about the sick people, how can you not vote for it? How could you turn to a cancer patient in Illinois and say, sorry, we can't support this law because it doesn't have home growing, or it doesn't have enough conditions, it doesn't include chronic pain, or it has too restrictive of a situation in tracking and possession limits. Now they can use the medical issue against us. Now they can come up with the strictest medical marijuana laws they want and say, well, you're not going to vote against the cancer patients, are you? And the fear I have with this Box Canyon is that as we get railroaded and moved into these states, especially the eastern and midwestern states that pass medical marijuana with dispensaries only, we soon run the risk of Big Pharma getting through their stage 3 trials and bringing to market some very effective cannabinoid therapies. Sativex is already in stage 3 trials. There will be others. There will be others that are whole plant extracts. There will be others that will be synthesized cannabinoids in various ratios. They'll be absolutely accurate for the dose. They'll be an accurate potency. They will be smokeless. You'll be able to use them as tinctures or sprays or inhalers or vaporizers or time-release capsules or what have you. They'll be covered by insurance. And in most cases, they won't get you high. And I can see in the late 2010s, early 2020s, these dispensary states starting to stock all these cannabinoid pharmaceuticals in the dispensaries rather than stocking the plant. I can see state governments getting into bed with big pharmaceutical corporations for the exclusive rights to distribute in the state dispensaries. And I can see the medical marijuana patients in those states who complain they can't get access to the plant not having a leg to stand on when there are cannabinoid pharmaceuticals that do the job just as well or better than the raw plant, and yet covered by insurance, not Schedule I drugs. So we may end up in a situation in America where much of the country is medical marijuana states that then become cannabinoid pharmaceutical states and slowly repeal or cut back their medical marijuana laws. We may end up in a situation where only the states in the West that were lucky enough to pass their medical marijuana laws in the late 20th and early 21st century are able to hold on to their home grow. And it will be interesting to see in those states where the laws passed are statutory and not constitutional, whether or not the legislatures then go after the right to home grow when they can be replaced with cannabinoid pharmaceuticals. This to me seems like the inevitable end path of medical marijuana. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying this is what I see. And I see that we really need to be pushing for the adult right to use cannabis, to grow cannabis for whatever reason. All use is none yet. If we continue to say why I use it gives me an excuse, we continue to give the government a reason to judge. We'll talk more about this in hour 2 and take your calls at 971-533-7111. Brian the Red, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it.